by tear gas the way we always have. They don't know.
But I'm like the perfect guy to be single because
creating ways for men to come together.
We're here. We are here. We are here. Another podcast. Thank you. If you're listening, rate, share, subscribe. You can listen on all platforms. Obviously, you're listening, but share on all platforms. You can watch on YouTube, BigMood TV. Thank you all for supporting us, showing us love. We're just sending out heart laser beams. Really quickly before I get into our guests. So I haven't spoken about it candidly yet, and I will more so after this podcast. But since I've mentioned leaving 12-step, not permanently, but taking my step away from it to explore, to take a journey into my own consciousness and my own varying experience, and go a different direction. And I went a different direction and learned so much and was blessed in so many ways. And so it inspired me to bring professionals on who know this work, and I'll let them talk about the work that they do. We have LadyBug Laurson, who's an inner healing specialist, and we have Becca Evans, who's a holistic recovery counselor, and they work in the plant medicine space. Can I say that? Beautiful. Okay. So Becca, we'll start with you. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell people about you.
Yes. Hi. My name is Becca. I have been working in the field of mental health and addiction recovery for about 10 years, a little over 10 years now. And I myself identify as a person in recovery. And I have also been intentionally using plant medicine to heal, grow, and evolve for the last 5.5 years.
Beautiful. LadyBug.
My name is LadyBug, or LB. People call me that as well. And I am an inner healing specialist, also a person in recovery, which is what brought me to the plant medicine arena, is recovery. And I have been in recovery for 6 years and working intentionally with medicines for the last 4 plus. And also have backgrounds in human development, counseling, social work, that kind of inform my trajectory.
Beautiful. So we'll start with LadyBug. Tell a little bit of your story. I want to give context because I've been doing this podcast a little bit, and I've had so many healers on so many different modalities, and there's a reason and something that catapults people into this healing space. There's some darkness, and I know obviously you're in recovery, so you know some of that darkness. But I don't want to do trauma porn, but let's provide perspective of where you were and how you got where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So I am one of the fortunate few, I think, as far as recovery goes, to have a really quick stint in addiction. 2 years in and out, down and dirty, wrecked my life real fast, found my way out real fast. I have a history of depression and anxiety, medicated for that, both of them debilitating. And alcohol and drugs were kind of a way to cope with that. I don't know, it didn't work, right? Until finally, after 2 years of doing that, I found myself suicidal. I attempted suicide with my son in my care, and he was taken away from me. And that was my bottom. And so came back from that, found 12-step recovery. And that was 12-step recovery was absolutely amazing. There's no other way that I could have gotten here without it. For me, it got me up to what felt like the ground floor of existing. And I felt like there was more. I felt like I could go deeper and experience life differently. And so I really wanted to look at the depression, the anxiety, the underlying factors to what 12-step programs called character defects. And so I began microdosing, experimenting with cannabis to come off of the pharmaceutical medication that I was on. That took about a year. And then I sat with ayahuasca that threw me, really just catapulted me into this space. I went through dark night of the soul, spiritual emergency, loss of identity, loss of spirituality, just feeling very empty and alone and scared. And I found community. I intentionally sought community. I cultivated community. The big part of what I do now is create community for folks who are wanting to be intentional about their healing, whether or not they're working with medicines. And have, for the most part, been self-guided on my inner healing journey. What I have found is that the modalities that worked for me already existed. I found them on my own. I found them within myself intuitively, and they worked for me. And then I discovered that they were actual things. So things like somatic work, working with what is in the body, where different emotions or beliefs exist in the body, and how can you resource from one part of the body that is resourced to another part of the body that's wounded. So I did somatic work on myself before I knew that was a thing. Parts work, looking at the different aspects of self that make up the ego, and how can they all work collaboratively together. And then also reparenting the inner child is another one that I just kind of found on my own intuitively and then discovered. And so when I call myself an inner healing specialist, I haven't been through a whole lot of specific training for the modalities that I practice. I've been through courses to kind of deepen my understanding of what I've learned for myself, and get some nuanced perspectives and additional tools. But because I found these things for myself, I found them within myself, I truly believe and hold that we are our own healers, that everything that we need, we have already. And sometimes it takes another person to help pull that out, to kind of help us uncover it. But it's already there. And so a lot of what I do is just help people access what is already within them.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love what you said about 12-step recovery being the ground floor. I always say this. That was my first introduction to personal development. That was like, okay, so now I'm at baseline and I know what work looks like. I know what growth looks like. And in order to maintain what I have, there has to be perpetual growth. And for me, it took me through a number of, as we were speaking before the podcast, took me through a number of healing modalities. Finally, subsequently, bringing me around 6 years in recovery, brought me to plant medicine after, but it was the ground floor. It was the ground floor, and it started that process for me. Okay, so Becca, let's talk about your background. I know I love your story. I've heard pieces of it, but share with me.
Yeah. So when I found drugs and alcohol, at about 13, I had experienced, all the stuff that brings you to that point usually. Just a lot of trauma, and I was really into just downers. Anything that numbed me, turned the volume of my brain as down as possible. And so eventually I found heroin, and heroin was my favorite and was not sustainable. So when I overdosed lethally, is when my family found out and when I kind of really needed to kind of get with the program. And that was at 20. And let's see, it took about 2 years. It actually took getting pregnant at 21, living in a recovery home, for me to really care about life and about living. I had suicidality throughout my teenage years, into my adulthood. So getting pregnant was the first step to respecting life, and what helped me seek a sponsor and begin working the steps. I personally struggled with 12-step meetings, mostly due to some of the toxicity and the shaming that would take place in meetings. But I really enjoyed Native American meetings because of the way that they would discuss spirituality. And I also really enjoyed Buddhist recovery meetings, because I actually enjoyed meditating around people. It was far more difficult to meditate on my own accord. So I was kind of in and out of recovery throughout my 20s, even though I had a child, even though I was going to school to be a counselor, even though I was working in mental health care. And I noticed that often it was because of the secrecy and the fact that if I was using, I couldn't really tell anyone because I was working in the field, I was in school, and it was just a big no-no. So I just kept a lot inside and really struggled with trust issues even throughout my periods of recovery. And when I reached some semblance of stability, I got pregnant again with my second child, and this was in the end of 2015. So after having my second child in 2016 and experiencing very deep postpartum depression that manifested as another existential crisis and return to alcohol, which I did not really want to engage in. I knew enough. Was on an SSRI, was having just all these difficult feelings and no community to hold me or to even give me context for what I was experiencing. I stumbled upon a lecture by Terence Mckenna, and the way he discussed mushrooms was absolutely reverent, and it's like it spoke to a deep part of myself, even though I had really only had one positive mushroom experience throughout all of my using. So I decided to give it a try. This was also when microdosing articles had just started coming out. So I decided, well, it can't be any worse than pharmaceuticals. So I found microdosing, and I had my first 5-gram experience, and it completely changed my life and completely gave me a deep experiential knowledge of divinity and spirituality, and helped me believe in something that was always just kind of a concept and was always something kind of forced upon me and was always something that seemed very far away and maybe didn't even exist. And turns out it existed within me. And all it took was consulting a humble little mushroom with respect. And they showed me so much. And that began the path of caring about what I put in my body as far as food went, cutting out alcohol, paying attention to who I was spending time with, which at points got lonely because I had to leave some people behind. And it took me a couple years actually to find integration circles and to find other people doing this work and taking it seriously and not thinking that it was some far out weird hippie thing. And it took, learning about many of the things LadyBug was mentioning, inner child healing, shadow work, cultivating a spiritual practice, learning about why I do the things that I do, the unconscious, the subconscious, seeking out different support, whether that be peer support or whether that be a therapist that understands what this work is, because it can be very difficult to work in a traditional therapy setting when there's no context for the material and the depth and the ancient indigenous ways that this work can kind of steer one to. And learning about the history of the use of this plant, which spans human history. Humans co-evolved with plant medicine. And looking back as a teenager and young adult, these rites of passages were something that maybe my spirit was looking for and didn't find in what was being offered, what still is being offered to most teenagers and young adults now. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's kind of how I came to this work. And also being a counselor and seeing the similar suffering of mine and seeing the revolving door of go into treatment, get out, relapse, go back in, and just seeing all of the problematic dynamics of a lot of current treatment, I had a strong feeling that somehow this work could be integrated with that. So that was my impetus for becoming a certified psychospiritual integration coach as well, to bridge the holistic and esoteric paradigms with the clinical paradigms and finding the similarities and yet giving a much deeper context to human suffering and life and everything that goes with it.
It's beautiful. Your reverence for Indigenous practices, does that come from a personal experience that you had that brought that to your light, or where does that come from? Because okay, let's just speak plainly about it. We were speaking a little bit into it. Woke culture wants to acknowledge Indigenous or Black and Brown people in a certain context, in a certain way. But I said, when you said that initially before the podcast, the difference between appreciation and appropriation. And I feel like you appreciate this culture and these cultures. Let's put it that way. So where does that come from? What experience did you have that brought that and said, this is understanding, okay, we understand this is ancient medicine. It's here long before us, it'll be here long after us. But what solidified that for you?
That's a good question. Well, I am white. I'm a white-bodied person, so I didn't grow up with any connection to any Indigenous practices, although mushroom use is indigenous to both my Irish and Hungarian ancestry. But I did spend a good chunk of my childhood in North Carolina on a military base where I just roamed the area freely and climbed trees and caught tadpoles and explored Earth. And looking back at my childhood, those were some of the happiest times. And I just felt so safe on Earth, talking to Earth. And when I was a teenager, I spent my senior year of high school at a residential facility where I had to finish high school. And we had one teacher there who educated us on things like the American Indian movement, Leonard Peltier, John Trudell, and gave us information about different tribal cosmologies. And I remember, and this was up in the mountains in near Julian. So whenever I was going through something, I would just kind of run out into the vast area somewhere and just pray out loud. I was raised Catholic, and yet going out into nature and just praying out loud felt right. It felt like this, okay, I don't know what's here, but I can feel something here far more than I could feel it, let's say, in a confessional with a priest. So that was kind of my context. So when I found the mushroom and when I began to read about Maria Sabina and the Mazatec people who stewarded the mushroom medicine and introduced it to Western white people, it was actually stolen from them, but whatever. I just knew that they were carrying the knowledge that had been suppressed in many other areas, especially Europe, so that we could learn to work with this medicine in the right way and not use it out of escapism, not use it to harm, not use it to not abuse it, basically, which then fit in with the recovery aspect of, like, this is not a toy. This is something that you approach with respect, and it is a reciprocal relationship. So that was kind of the context of learning about, and it's really fascinating too, just to know that there are ties to this medicine in every ancient culture. And the more I read about it and experience it, spending a month in Peru taught me so much about and witnessing their reverence for this medicine. So yeah, that was a lot of words, but
a lot of words, but well expressed.
Becca, you are my go-to for all things earth medicine. Your wisdom of the indigenous practices and cultures and where all of this comes from and how to honor and respect that. And then also, moving away from even psychedelics, your wisdom of non-psychoactive plant substances and how they can help with sleep or with moon cycle or anything. You just have a tremendous amount of wisdom there when it comes to the earth and respect and reverence. And that's one of my favorite things about you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I want to ditto that. You're kind of my North Star when it comes to doing this. I always hate to say the right way. But it's become, I'm going to say it officially. I've never said it on the podcast, but I've had my journeys with psilocybin in the last year. And you've been the support there for me in doing this and experience this as a sacrament. It's been very good to me. And that's the thing it's odd for me to say on here, is because I've been such an advocate and a proponent of like recovery. And this has become such an integral part of my recovery that it took me to a place that in relationships, I never thought I could be. And a man I'm proud of, the music I listen to, the clothes I wear has all shifted because of this medicine. And you've been there throughout that process, telling me, "Hey, it's getting slippery." You know what I mean? Like even there, because I'm that kind of guy. But yeah, I'm so appreciative of the work you do, because you're the real deal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
You are too, LadyBug.
Yes.
Speaking of that, let's go to you, LadyBug. Let's talk about what an inner healing specialist, what that is. Tell me what that is to you.
Yeah. So I work with humans who want to have a different, deeper experience of life. Who, like we were talking about before the podcast, want to find some way to ride the waves of life, right? And understanding that there will be ups and downs. Being able to ride the waves and not get pulled underwater at any given moment. And it's interesting because my approach has shifted. I just noticed this looking at Facebook memories yesterday. How when I first started doing this work 4 years ago, I very much was do the work, ask what am I supposed to be learning right now, and then dive into it and do it, and evolve or repeat. Those were very much my mantras in the beginning.
That's the abrasive.
Yeah.
Early in work, I'm sure you've experienced it too. The evangelism a little bit that we have. I'm sure if you're a coach or like a facilitator, there's a little bit of evangelism that comes with that. It's like,
And I think for me, it came from this place of desperation.
Yeah.
Right. So this was before I was working with others. This was my own personal work. And that was how I was approaching it. And I really wanted to experience life differently. And so I was tackling everything head on. and like really immersing myself in as much as I could. Let's learn about attachment style and how do I let go of attachment, and let's tackle this core abandonment wound, right? And let's do all of these things and really heal, evolve, or repeat. What is this trying to teach me right now? What am I supposed to be learning? And today, I am very much in a space of, you are perfect. And in this present moment, there are no problems.
You're right where you're supposed to be.
Absolutely. And that is the space that I feel the most beneficial to other humans from. Not the drill instructor approach that I gave myself in the beginning, but really that space of unconditional acceptance, unconditional love, modeling that, again, going back to community, right? How important it is to have people mirror the things in us that we're wanting to see and feel in ourselves. And so that's very much what I do in the spaces that I create with clients, is provide just a really safe container for folks to explore themselves without judgment, with just acceptance and love.
Absolutely.
And in doing that, I find that people naturally shed the layers. I can't tell you how many times I have a client who starts the session saying something like, I have no idea what my priorities are. Everything is chaotic. I'm feeling unsafe in my life, but I realize that there's nothing actually threatening me. They start the session there, and it takes 15, 20 minutes for them to realize, oh, everything's cool. Everything's cool. I know what I'm doing. I'm tapped into that wisdom. I can feel it. And really, I just do that by creating a container of acceptance.
Beautiful. It's the container is something that, it's a phrase I use as well. It's holding space. And when I think of holding space, I think of like the holy position of like just reception of people, of where they are.
Yes.
Where they are, and the non-judgment, and just being like, this is, I think I might have said that to you. You're exactly where you are in the position, in the space that you're in this exact moment. It is perfect. It is perfect. And the next steps you take will be the perfect steps, even if they're painful. Even if they're painful, they're the perfect steps. And it's almost like predeterminism. Like, you're on the road. That's the road you're gonna be on, whether you like it or not. And you get to shift and make decisions, but you're gonna make it to where you're gonna go through the process you're gonna go through. Anyway, we have. I wish I had scheduled more time, because this could be a long ass conversation. But I want to get into, because I've been on some symposiums with like UCLA about plant medicine in recovery, and plant medicine in contemporary medicine. And there's a very clinical aspect to it. And I know, Becca, you spend a lot of time in this space, advocating in this space, going to conferences, like really entrenched in it, in a way that's super admirable to me. So thank you. Where do you see this going? Because right now it's an explosion, and it's a beautiful explosion. My fear is that they're gonna put it in a pill, and they're gonna sell it, and they're gonna ruin they're gonna take away the mushroom that's so dear to me and so special to me, and they're gonna like dose it to you, and which is great, because it's gonna be like, offer this to everybody, right? It's gonna offer it to more people, but it's also gonna take away from the indigenous practice and like completely whitewash and like wipe away. It could. It could. That's kind of what Western medicine does. It'll take that away, which is a good thing. It's gonna be like, okay, offer it more to more people, but like, anyway, where do you see this going? Where do you want to see it going? Optimistically.
Optimistically, I think the westernization is inevitable, because of how much money there is
absolutely.
in it, how much vested interest there is in that route. And, there will be people who are introduced to it that way. And then my hope is that they find these community-based, Indigenous-led and stewarded ceremonial spaces and practitioners and people who practice with that mindset of community care and keeping the spiritual aspect in it. I'm sure there is a lot of use for the clinical approach for people who maybe don't have any connection to spirituality. However, for those who have a spiritual framework and who have maybe ancestral ties to certain traditions or lineages, I hope that they find it in these community spaces because they're around and they're growing. I know of them locally here in San Diego and Northern California and different parts of the country. Yes. So I think my hope is that there will be both, and my hope that both can be sustained, because obviously the one with venture capital will be sustained, right? But that is why we have to practice sacred reciprocity and give money back.
Beautiful.
And make sure that these community-based ones are being led by BIPOC voices.
I love you.
Yes.
I need to get you on stages, please, because people need to hear this perspective as eloquently as you're presenting it. Because no, it's beautiful. Thank you, and you're a beautiful advocate for this medicine that has been. And for me, I have you saw my relationship. I had such a deep relationship with this medicine, and both in ceremonial, both in like personal use, and I just don't want to see the sanctity of it like demolished, and I want to see the integrity like remain. But there's also room for people who would never experience this before, who are going to experience this on a much broader scale. So
Yeah, I think that it's I like to be the voice that that is a little dissenting sometimes. So I'm not dissenting necessarily. I actually very much think that is important. And also the space of having, I'm definitely against the pharmaceutical industry and monetizing it. And I'm anti-capitalist.
Me too. Yeah. I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm just like, hey, it's sketchy.
Yeah.
Hey, what are you doing over there? Too much money over there.
And also, like we're saying, having people introduced to the benefits of these medicines who wouldn't otherwise be introduced. Even without the spiritual component, they are helpful. And so I actively, so this is more me practicing humility than anything. I actively try to hold that the medicines find the people who need it, right? And whether they find the people who need them through ceremony or through a pill, hopefully they're still helpful, right? And also, I really want to stress the importance of community, of integration, right? Of not turning these medicines into take this pill every day for the rest of your life, right? Because that's where the pharmaceutical industry went wrong with everything else.
Absolutely. Take the pill and just, that's it.
Yeah. The therapeutic approach,
never-ending
the
cycle.
integration of the wisdoms that are learned, the integration of the neural pathways that are changed, right?
So it's been, my story with it has been, I've gotten off like 3 medications. I've like my brain has changed. It's been like, it's been so crazy. And they integrate, I don't know. Let's go into the mechanism of integration. Let's go into that. And both of you bounce back and forth really quick. If you could.
Yeah. I think we have different approaches.
Yeah. So I'm just going to shut the fuck up and let you guys go off. So talk to each other.
So, integration is, it's the process of taking what was experienced in medicine, whether that's a microdose or a macrodose ceremony, taking that experience and pulling out what that means for day-to-day life, right? How does this apply to day-to-day life. One of my first really high dose ceremonies, the experience was, none of this is real. None of this is real. All of it is silly and made up. And okay, cool. Is that something that I just share that story? And I'm like, yeah, I had this really cool mushroom journey one time and none of it was real. It was absurd. Right? No, I took that and I was like, oh, okay. So if none of this is real, then that means that I get to decide what matters. I get to choose where I spend my energy. And that is something that I actively integrate every single day still, years later, is reminding myself of that. And so finding ways to pull the wisdoms out and really kind of weave them into the fiber of my being. And that can look like a million different things.
Yep. I echo that as well. For me, what are you really learning if you have to keep going back again and again and again? You know, there are some people whose path maybe it is to go to ceremony every month, right? But for me, as someone who's been dependent on both pharmaceuticals and drugs and alcohol, how can I live my life in a way that I approach it as the least often as I can and practice those principles in my daily life? And my methodology usually involves a lot of neural education. I love the brain, I love the nervous system, and I love the gut and how it's all connected. So I like focusing on what are you putting in your body? What are some subtle changes you can make there? How are you moving your body? How often are you going outside? What makes you feel connected? Do you like to journal, or do you just like to put a bunch of paint on a page? What activities call to you? And it always changes. Integration is definitely a never ending process in that different methodologies or modalities, or even spiritual aspects, if those even call to you, are relevant at different times. So for me, Buddhism often weaves in and out, right?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes this work can wake you up to, I'll just say it, other dimensions, right? And we don't have a lot of framework in modern society for what those mean, which is why reading about old Indigenous wisdom can be helpful. But then sometimes when, I think I heard someone say once, when you can get lost in the sauce, right, of all the different esoteric aspects. And then sometimes for me, Buddhism can be grounding to know who I am underneath everything else, right? Which is kind of what spoke to me before I even went into this work. So sometimes it can be helpful to simplify. So that's kind of my integration framework.
That's interesting. I do very few of those things. I always recommend that people journal and make the statement, the disclaimer that I don't. I've tried journaling several times. It's not a thing that works for me.
It's not for me either.
It's not for me.
No.
Sometimes I will paint. I do need nature, but I've cultivated a life where I can be in nature every single day. And so that's just part of my life now. So it's integrated into my life.
Yeah.
My experience with these medicines and what they have given me to work with has been a lot of practical things. I am not very much into the esoteric, or really even the mystical very much. I come from a very, very practical place. And so, for example, currently I am what I am just going to call a master class of compassion. And I was shown recently in ceremony that there are spaces in my life where I am not practicing vulnerability where I could be, right? So the medicine showed that to me. It also showed me that when I practice vulnerability, that's how I cultivate an inner sense of safety. And when I have an inner sense of safety, I'm able to come from a place of compassion. And you want to bring Buddhism back into it. That is where right action comes from a place of compassion, right?
Absolutely.
And so my integration right now doesn't look like journaling or art or dance, or it doesn't look like any of those things. It looks like leaning into the discomfort, recognizing when my egoic defense mechanisms are coming online, saying, oh, my ego thinks there's something to protect right now. What does vulnerability look like? How can I lean into safety and cultivate a sense of safety where I'm feeling like I need to protect myself so that I can interact in this relationship from a place of compassion?
Beautiful.
And so my integration practices are very practical.
Yeah. as are mine. Mine are very like, I spent the last decade in 12-step. So for me, it's like my experiences have solidified, like, if I want to keep the change, because the shifts and the transformation I've gone through my work with medicine, it needs to be practiced in all my affairs. Needs to translate in all my affairs. So for me, it made me so externally focused. And that's a big difference, I think, with like illicit drugs and like plant medicines, because it makes you shoot like heart at the world. You're like, I want to make a difference. At least that's my experience. I was like, I'm dedicated to making an impact, like changing things. So like practical, my integration was like creating things that were going to affect the community, like working with other people who are, whether it be sponsees in whatever program I'm in, working with sponsees. All these books here are books that I go through, or when I'm in my zone, I'm going through these books and reading my readings every day, different texts, different, even the Bible, just taking Solomon's words and digesting them and spending time meditating on them. Even Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's just it brought me into such a place of study and service. And that was integration for me.
Yeah, you mentioned a key part that we need in order to be able to integrate, which is social connectedness with others who understand and are on the same path.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because LadyBug and I both facilitate integration circles to provide that service and to help people build community. Because when I first started doing this in end of 2016, I had no fucking people to talk about except for random people in a Terence Mckenna Facebook group. So being able to have face-to-face conversations with people doing this work who understand these, going to another dimension or healing birth
Crossing
trauma or
right?
You can't really talk about that in a regular therapy session. So
my therapist is cool. My therapist lets me talk about it. She's like, my therapist is so dope. She supports it. So like, she's like, it's working for you.
That's a good therapist.
And she's a Black woman. She's so Black, like, and I say so Black in like the blackest Black way. And like the so proud Black woman. And she's like, loves that I've gotten into this and is super supportive into it. Sorry to say that. But I forgot my fucking point. That happens on this podcast all the time. It's okay. So we're gonna wrap up. We're running out of time. But I want you both to have like final statements of like what you're hopeful to see in the future of this medicine. And what you're hopeful to see in your own impact. Because I know you both want to make an impact. And I see that in both of your hearts, that you really want to change things. And that's, to me, I rant ad nauseum on this podcast about people make an impact in your community. Create the space to make the change you want to see in the world. Create that space. I know you're beginning your business to create those spaces. So I want to hear where you want to see this going, where you're dedicated to seeing it going, where individually, collectively. Go, be free.
I am all about authentic expression and tapping into who authentic self is, honoring what comes up and just being really true to self. And so my hope is that with my clients, they're able to honor that, to move through the fear and the discomfort of honoring themselves, and really truly step into who they are, and for them to be the impact that they're meant to be in the world. And then also with everyone, community is absolutely critical. And the integration circle that I host in San Diego was something that I created because I needed community, and it just has grown over 4 years. It was not created as a professional offering, or
And I love that you both do that.
Yeah, it's
that shows your dedication.
Oh my gosh, I love it too. Yeah, so more community spaces, more community building, more people getting together, and sharing their experiences and supporting one another, so that
So exciting.
Yeah.
I have a huge project that's coming up. I've talked to Becca about it, and I'd love to bring you. We're creating spaces. My partner's running it, and we're waiting for approval right now. But creating safe spaces for women and to empower women, and we can bring this aspect into it. Obviously, it's with the city, so we're not able to bring every aspect into it.
Mhm.
But the lessons that you've downloaded can be brought into the space. I want Becca to obviously express her expertise, and I'd love to bring you along to be guest speakers at this. It's for women by women, empowering women into embodying their fullest potential and have safe spaces. So I'm inviting you to collaborate with that. But Becca, up to you. Where do you want to see this going?
Well, I feel that I'm on a personal mission to help evolve what the word recovery means, and to destigmatize the use of plant medicine, or any entheogen, really, with intention and respect in recovery. I find that in my experience as a counselor and in my personal life, something that has kept people in isolation is feeling as though we can't be fully honest about things. And this has been something that it has taken me a little while to be fully honest about, for that fear of being shunned and being told that I'm not in recovery and I'm just getting high. And if only they knew the depth of what this work has done for my life, that I had only wished I'd found it sooner.
Come on, somebody.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to be free about this really quick, and I've never done this on the podcast because so many people have correlated it to a recovery podcast, and I don't think I'm any less in recovery now than I've ever been. I'm actually happier in the space that I've been in after this work than I was in 8 years of like hardcore militant the culture that 12-step culture that hurt me like it was harmful, and it wasn't the program, it was the culture.
Mhm.
And I separate that now, and I'm able to bring that into other 12-step programs and be like, hey, no, we're not doing this culture, we're doing this. But I don't change my sobriety date in the sense that I don't speak and say I'm Eric and I've been sober since, but what I do say is I've been actively in recovery, working since 2013, working my ass off, going through any modality possible, anything humanly possible to be a better person and to grow and to heal. And you guys, this is the podcast where I'm coming out and saying that. I've never said that on here, and I wanted to do that with you folks on the podcast because you've just made the case for it. This healing's for everybody. I want this not for obviously if you have recurring conditions and things like that, it may not be for everybody, but it should be for the masses. This is available, and it was available for me, and my life transformed, and I'm so grateful to you, especially you we can't get into why, but you have been such a blessing. You really have. I love you very much. I don't know if you know. We get in our tiffs, but
Yeah.
but thank you both for coming on. Plug your social if you want. Plug your social media. We're gonna plug it for you, but plug it again for the people who are listening, and give some parting words.
Yeah. So thank you again. Thank you for having me on. And my Instagram is Mycophoria. That's MyCoforia. And my website is www.mycophoria.org.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Becca. How fun to have you on here with me.
Yeah.
My Instagram is Hausch Gatherings, and that's spelled HAUX Gatherings, all one word. And my website is www.hauschgatherings.com.
And we text those to me so we can have them under you on YouTube so people can see them. We'll put them in the bio so everybody can follow you folks. And will be clips of this and blah blah blah. It'll be replayed over and over. Thank you both so much for holding the space with me.
Yeah, thank
See how our
you.
voices came down.
Yeah. And thank you for opening up about this, because that is how we normalize it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And my goal is, I spoke at a recovery conference last year, and my goal is to have people like you and myself come on to these conferences and to speak about this work and legitimize. We're gonna get so much shade. The chat section is gonna be so fucking filled with hate. But
I'm ready.
Our lives are a description, are an expression of the success and the power of this work. If we were down in the dumps, strung out, then I get it. But we're doing better. We're healing. We're doing the work inside and out. So thank you guys for being on, folks, for being on Spreading This Energy. Okay, blessings. We're out of here. Peace, peace, peace.